right, well, thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening to talk about garbage. We are so excited to have you. My name is Tiffany Orth. I serve on the board for Conservation Minnesota. A little bit about me, my favorite outdoor spot in Minnesota is Battle Creek Regional Park in Maplewood. So encourage everyone to check it out if you haven't had the chance to. But we have some excellent speakers here tonight and we'll introduce them shortly. For those of you who don't know, Conservation Minnesota is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to protect the Minnesota you love by solving our state's most important environmental problems. We are committed to protecting people and places from the adverse impacts of pollution and climate change, while ensuring that everyone who calls Minnesota home has access to the great outdoors and opportunities to enjoy it. And our work is centered around bringing people together across regions and backgrounds and beliefs to find real solutions. And just on a personal note, again, this mission really hits home with me on so many levels. I decided to become a board member because the outdoors, specifically nature and animals, have always healed my heart and have provided safe spaces for me to reflect and connect to my core purpose. And I'm imagining that many of you who are joining today have your own personal connections and experiences with the outdoors. So hopefully this mission hits home with you too. So tonight we'll be giving you all an in-depth look behind the scenes on one of our most important bills at the Capitol this session. Everyone know, I think people are raising their hands, so I don't know if that indicates that there might be an issue, but hopefully everybody can at least hear me. Okay. So we'll be giving you an in-depth look inside the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act. While garbage is not the most glamorous issue that Conservation Minnesota works on, addressing Minnesota's garbage problem is critical to accomplishing all our major goals like clean water, clean air, and healthy communities. This bill can make a huge impact on waste reduction and recycling in Minnesota, setting us on the right path for more action on the problem down the line. So now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our moderator for this evening. We have Nels Paulson, Policy Director with Conservation Minnesota. Nels works to keep our members informed about what's happening at the state capitol, and in turn also keeps state elected officials informed about what we're hearing from our members. Nels's favorite outdoor spot, I feel like I'm taking away his thunder here in Minnesota, is Saginaga Lake in the northern portion of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. And with that, Nels, I'll turn it over to you to lead the discussion.
Thanks, Tiffany, for the introduction, and welcome everyone again. And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And I'd like to take a minute just to thank my colleague, Avery Hildebrand. He did a ton of work setting this up, and we really appreciate your work, Avery. And we also appreciate our two helpers tonight, Dylan and Representative Jordan. And I get the pleasure of introducing both of them. Dylan DeThomas is the VP of Public Policy and Government Affairs at the Recycling Partnership, where he directs advocacy efforts for the organization at the local, state, and federal levels. And Dylan has been kind enough to come join us in Minnesota a couple times this legislative session, bringing his expertise from Oregon and from his nationwide experience right here to Minnesota. So thank you, Dylan, for joining us. And we also have Representative Sidney Jordan, who represents House District 60A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. That's Northeast Minneapolis, for those of you who aren't familiar with the numbers and letters. And Representative Jordan was elected to the House in 2020, and she has been one of Conservation Minnesota's favorite legislators to work with for all sorts of environmental reasons. But two of Representative Jordan's big highlights last session were passing school meals for all kids in Minnesota, which was nation leading, and also passing $240 million for lead pipe replacement. So we really appreciate Representative Jordan's time and her advocacy as vice chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Finance and Policy Committee. And I think we'll just jump right into the questions if that's all right with you, Dylan and Representative Jordan. And Representative Jordan, I think maybe the first question is for you, when we can kind of actually, sorry about that. I forgot two more things. I got to look down and check my notes. My apologies to everyone attending tonight that we won't have time for questions because we're we're pretty short on time as Representative Jordan is actually still doing her job at the Capitol, but we hope to be able to take questions at future webinars. And then my colleague Avery, I think, was going to kick us off with a little interactive poll just to see, test your knowledge of Minnesota's garbage dilemma. So I don't know if folks can see, but there's a poll that just popped up on my screen that says, test your garbage knowledge. How much garbage does the Twin Cities Metro generate each year? And you can go ahead and click through that. Looks like there's a lot of people who think 3 tons might be the right answer. I think that might be just a hair off on the, maybe there's a decimal place missing, but the second question is, how much of the trash that ends up in our landfills could be recycled instead? And I see people filling that out. And Avery, this is a glitch in our plan. I actually don't know that you shared the answers to the poll with me. So if there's a way to indicate the correct answers, I'd be happy to hear from you.
I'll break the fourth wall here. Hi, everyone. Avery, Conservation Minnesota. I'm happy to let you know we have just about everyone filled it out. And the correct answer for the first question is actually, you're right, Nels, 3.3 tons, at least according to the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And for question 2, the correct answer is 2/3, or roughly 66%. So thanks so much for doing that.
The really important part of that is the 2/3 part. So 2/3 of our trash that ends up in landfills could actually be recycled. So that's why we're here, because the packaging Act is the bill that's going to help us really move the needle on recycling. But let me jump back to Representative Jordan now. And for those folks who aren't really familiar with Minnesota's solid waste system or how bad the garbage problem is, Representative Jordan, do you have a few thoughts on describing how bad the situation is?
Yeah, it's a pretty dire situation, and it's one I've been serving on the Environment Committee and serving in the legislature. This is my 5th session, and it's an issue that comes up, and it's an issue that comes up all across the state. It's one issue that is near and dear, unfortunately, to my and my constituents' hearts, because we live downwind from the HERC, which is a garbage incinerator. It is just across the river, and it emits across North Minneapolis and Northeast Minneapolis. And we in Northern Minneapolis have some of the highest rates of asthma in the state, in particular in North Minneapolis, which is also a community that is overburdened by pollution in many respects. And not coincidentally is also has one of the highest concentrations of people of color in all of Minnesota. And it's something that, hits home for me very personally. I have asthma, and there are many days, especially in the summer, where I can't actually leave my home because I can't breathe, which is hard for someone like me who relies on walking and biking to get around. But we've heard of it. We've been hearing from people across the state. We know that it's something that is growing. We know that we are going to be producing as people, as humans, 20% more garbage over the next couple years. And we know that actually packaging in particular is currently a very large part of our waste that is generated. It's about 40%, and that's going to continue to grow. Just think about how many Amazon boxes you started accumulating over the past couple years, and think about how much more of your life that has taken up. I talk a lot about, we think we have a lot of choice. You go to the Quarry, which is where the grocery store is in my neighborhood, and you have lots of choices when you're looking for a laundry detergent. You have flakes, you have pods, you have liquid, you have all sorts of smells, but you don't have a choice in what packaging that laundry detergent comes in. It all comes in single-use plastic. And so we need to make sure that we're actually addressing our problems here to make sure that we're not generating so much trash. We also know that it's not just incinerators. Our landfills are also at capacity. And we don't have a lot of great spaces to put more landfills, but for many folks in the metro area, you might be familiar with the Burnsville landfill that is projected to grow to be taller than the Buck Hill ski jump that is nearby. So if you think it is Minnesota, we're kind of a flat state, but that is, one of our ski hills, and that is, we're soon going to have a landfill that is as big as our ski hill. So it's definitely a problem, and it's time for the legislature to really start to address it and hold those who are responsible for generating all that waste accountable for the waste that they generate.
Thanks, Representative Jordan. And one number that always stuck with me was the statewide recycling rate was kind of stuck at 40% for years or even decades in Minnesota. And Dylan, I'm not sure. I think your organization might have some data on some actual recycling rates that aren't skewed by highly recyclable materials that certain commercial industries use.
Yeah, and thank you. It's an honor to be here and thrilled to be on the call with you and Rep. Jordan and Els. My organization recently released a residential recycling report. So meaning looking at recycling rates for the residential sector and not just the commercial sector. The commercial sector, in particular, the business to business, like the back of the house cardboard and plastic, is recycled at a really high rate, and so that 40% is skewed quite significantly. And what we found is that that Minnesota's residential recycling rate is half of that, is just 20%. And that means that we're only recycling 32% of cardboard from the residential system in Minnesota, 21% of aluminum cans, like the one I'm drinking from right now, and 20% of PET bottles, which are those bottles that are soda and water bottles, and can do a great deal more. Our data shows that with a smart, well-designed DPR bill like the one that Rep. Jordan has put forward, that could triple all of those recycling rates and really rescue those from landfills and incinerators like the HERC.
That's right. And Dylan mentioned our first alphabet soup acronym of the night, but EPR is Extended Producer Responsibility, and that's exactly what the Packaging Act does. It makes those who produce things think about the back end on where it goes when they're done with it. So maybe we'll jump right into the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act. Representative Jordan, how would you describe what the act does to folks who've never heard of it before?
Yeah, so I've been working on this bill all year, and I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. It is going to be up for a vote in the Minnesota House tomorrow. Knock on wood. Obviously things are fluid in the legislature. We're trying to get as much done as we can. But one of the things I'm excited to get done would be a nation-leading bill, like the one that we have up in our environment omnibus bill. And this bill is it's complex, but it has a simple concept, and it's that the producers of waste pay for it. And those are the people that are packaging their products, their goods in single-use plastics, which are horrible for our health. We know that microplastics are a growing problem. We know that that toxins in that plastic is leaching into our soil and water. We're breathing it in. And so this bill shifts those costs onto the producers. So the brands and the large corporations who are actually generating that waste. Like I said earlier, consumers, have lots of choices, but we don't have choices in what packaging our products come in. And so this holds these corporations accountable to actually paying to deal with this. And one of the other features of our House bill, which again would be an extremely strong bill, would not only hold those producers accountable for paying for the cost of that, it also sets targets in statute to ensure that all of the packaging that is sold in Minnesota is either compostable, reusable, or recyclable by 2032. And would be very aggressive in a good way, which would be very aggressive, ambitious goals, but they're ones that we can do, and they're ones that we need to be able to accomplish. It also sets reduction goals for all of the other waste that we're working on, and make sure that we can really turn off the tap of the trash that we don't know quite what to do with because we're running out of space for it. So it really is about shifting those costs onto who is responsible for them.
If I can add, I think the exciting thing about that bill is that it would, when it passes, it's going to transform the packaging that we see on store shelves alongside bills similar to it, like the bill that passed 2 years ago in California that's currently under implementation, is that it will make sure that I feel like it bears repeating, the stuff that is on the store shelves is either going to be reusable, refillable, compostable, or recyclable. Otherwise, it's not sold in Minnesota. And that is a transformational shift. And then in addition to that, the recycling system is paid for, the polluter pays principle by the folks who are doing it. So I just wanted to repeat that.
That's great. And Representative Jordan, what are some of the challenges that this bill has faced throughout the legislative process?
Yeah, I mean, this bill has been through a number of committees. I am really fortunate to be serving in the Minnesota House, which has a strong progressive majority. But this has faced a lot of opposition from industry groups who do not want to be held accountable for the waste that they produce. I think it's no surprise that if someone else is paying to deal with your mess, you probably like that, even though you're responsible for it. And some of the largest, corporations are really pushing that and making that front and center. So, I am fortunate to represent people who encourage me to stand up to corporate power and stand up to corporate polluters. I see quite a few of you actually on the attendee list. So hi to all you East Siders in Minneapolis. It's always an honor to represent you. But other people are hearing from all of these large industry groups, and that's concerning. So there has been massive amounts. I don't think I've seen so many out-of-state corporate lobbyists flying in on the regular to Minnesota and wandering around the Capitol in expensive suits. But this has been the year for it, and they're fighting this bill. And so tomorrow is a really monumental step. Again, knock on wood, it might be the day after, depending on how much we can get through. We need to pass a strong bill off of the House floor, and we need to stand still. We need to stand strong on those principles of holding corporate polluters and the people who are profiting off of this responsible for the waste they clean up or generate. So it really has been quite a bit of corporate lobbying. There's also just people who are concerned about, change. Change, I think, is hard for people, but this is really a change that puts our health and our environment first. And it's one that we need to make sure that politicians here in St. Paul are listening to people who are ultimately bearing the costs, both in our bodies and in our wallets and on our tax returns for the cost of this waste.
Dylan, if you are looking at this bill and you're speaking to this group of people right now who are probably pretty good recyclers, I'm making some assumptions, but would the people on this call have to change what they do or how they recycle to comply with the Packaging Act?
The primary thing I think that would change is that you would have a consistent system, meaning you'd have the same statewide recycling list at the end. So whether you're in the in the north of the state or in the Twin Cities area, you'll have the same opportunity to recycle, which is one of the great promises that laws like this provide for residents in that state. I live in Oregon, and we'll have the same benefits when our EPR law is fully implemented around the full state. But the great news is that it really doesn't change a whole lot, is that as a recyclers, you're just going to have more of an opportunity to recycle, and that consistency, equitable access, meaning you have the same level of access to recycling that you do to trash, and that you won't have to pay for it, which is a significant change that will provide significant cost savings for communities. And then communities can dedicate those resources towards other aspects of the solid waste system in Minnesota. So making sure you're collecting more organics, or diverting and building out a necessary reuse system that, again, this bill will create for the great state of Minnesota.
And Dylan, do you mind touching on other states who've passed this bill or who are working on similar legislation?
Yeah, so Minnesota would be the fifth state that will pass this type of bill, joining California, Colorado, Maine, and Oregon. This is, in a lot of ways, the most far-reaching bill that we've seen that has those strong rates and dates, the goals that Rep. Jordan mentioned earlier. And as well as that incredible mandate of making sure that materials are recyclable, reusable, or compostable, which mirrors the bill in California. And again, married with California, having something on the West Coast as well as in the Midwest is going to be transformational to the packaging system for the United States.
Representative Jordan, you mentioned a number of industry lobbyists, and one thing that I've heard them say in committee, and if I was going to play devil's advocate, they might say to you, "Can't we just educate Minnesotans more on how to better recycle?" Isn't that the answer? What do you think about that question?
You know, when I talk to Minnesotans, they're already doing their best to recycle. You know, and now especially as I worked on recycling issues, Minnesotans are already doing their part. We try to figure out, but recycling's hard. You know, these numbers, I don't know what they all mean. And I think when you're busy and trying to figure it out, that can be difficult. If you live in a building that has more than one household in it, that can, like I do, I live in an apartment with many other families. You're not always responsible for other people's recycling habits. The other thing that is important to know is we are not really, we talk a lot about a waste hierarchy and a reuse hierarchy. We need to get better at both reducing and reusing in addition to recycling. And so we have to make sure that we're addressing all aspects of our waste hierarchy, and this bill does that. The other thing this bill does is it uses some of the fees that are collected to deal with our trash problem to better actually educate people about how to recycle. So even though there is still you still have to make sure you're putting things, you know, out to the curb, so your hauler can take things away. But this bill will also make sure that we do have resources to better recycle, but really, again, the responsibility isn't on all of us who really don't have choices in what we're getting. And in fact, much of the time, we don't even have a choice I don't have a choice necessarily in the fruit snacks that I buy, what kind of packaging those fruit snacks come in. And a lot of times that isn't even recyclable. So making sure that we're actually taking advantage of overhauling our entire system to promote sustainable waste management is part of the deal. And we need to make sure that we are paying for it by who's responsible, which is the producers. And keep in mind that packaging is really only 40%, which is a very large percentage of our waste stream, and it will continue to grow. But there's 60% of other things going into our waste stream that we also need to deal with. So this bill not only helps with some of that education on recycling, but it does make sure that we can continue to work in other aspects of our waste stream to better protect our health and environment.
And Dylan, I think I've heard you say that this bill could be good for businesses, particularly certain businesses, if they make packaging that is friendlier for the environment, or if they have recycled content goals. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. And I want to say that when we talk about producers, we're actually talking about brands. So not the manufacturers of the packaging, you know, itself, but rather the people who are making the decisions what to put their products and packages in. So who is not the person who makes that plastic pouch, but rather the brand that's selling that, you know, something that's in that plastic pouch. And I use that plastic pouch as an example because under these EPR systems, they set fees on what the impact on the recycling system is. So the stuff that is highly recyclable, that can use recycled content, those fees are lower than the fees for things that are not recyclable and are not able to include recycled content. An example is Oregon, which is currently midway through its implementation process, and they release their draft fees for what the various packaging pieces are. And mixed paper, so packaging made out of container board, you know, cardboard, things like that, is a fraction of the cost of those flexible pouches that Rep. Jordan was talking about that the fruit snacks are sold in. In fact, it's 1,500% higher for those plastic pouches than it is for those highly recyclable materials. And then in addition to that, there's something, a buzzword called eco-modulation, which means that the greater, better environmental benefit that you're making packaging decisions, that your fees would then be lowered. But if you're making things that are using, say, inks or dyes or adhesives that make things less recyclable or make it harder to recycle things, then your fees would then go even higher.
Representative Jordan, you mentioned, I just want to take a minute to maybe look away from the Packaging Act. Are there other bills in the solid waste world that are on your mind for future legislative sessions?
Yeah, well, we have We have another one that is actually included in our omnibus bill that, again, knock on wood, I'm a little superstitious, will be voted on tomorrow to do producer responsibility for boat wrap plastic. You know, we are a land of 10,000 lakes, and while we don't have one in Northeast Minneapolis, most other people have a lake in their backyard. And so there's a huge amount of plastic that is generated in wrapping boats and RVs and things like that, and plastic to last through the winter. So Representative Kraft has been working on that. Some other bills that I'm excited about, that we will hopefully be able to pass and work on next year and into the future, is Representative Hollins, who represents part of St. Paul, has an e-waste bill that would also make sure that we are dealing with our e-waste, products. So making sure that we are, that all of our computers and TVs and cell phones and everything else, there's a lot of those things also have a lot of responsible uses that we can turn our computers into other things. There's very valuable minerals in there. We don't need to be necessarily mining all over to get new materials, particularly I think in certain parts of Minnesota. It's a little bit of a digression, but there's a lot of other recycling that needs to be done in terms of e-waste. Another bill that I have that I've been working on with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is a bill to make sure that we are actually counting all of our waste and getting a handle on what is actually going into our waste streams this year. So making sure that we know exactly how much aluminum, for example, is in our waste stream. How much of this could be recycled? How much of this is hazardous? So we can get a better sense of what other recycling needs to be done. There's also EPR in the past I've worked on for carpet. We know that carpet is very bulky. It's hard to recycle because if it gets wet, it's not recyclable. So we need to make sure that we're holding those producers responsible. We've worked on mattresses. There's a lot that needs to be done. Another bill that I have that I'm really excited about is removing the state currently preempts local cities and other counties from enacting plastic bag bans. So, you know, for example, the city of Minneapolis a few years ago tried to ban single-use plastic bags at supermarkets and convenience stores. And the Republicans in the charge of the legislature at the time preempted them, so prevented them from doing that. And so I am reversing it. So I guess the Republicans have called that the ban, but I think I actually like that. So I'm gonna steal it and own it. So there's a lot we can do on plastics and recycling. Last year, we also worked on a study to actually study microplastics in humans. So there's a lot of waste work that needs to be done. And I'm hopeful that the more we work on waste, the faster we can accelerate actually shutting down the HRC in North Minneapolis. This is a really critical environmental justice issue. And it's also just, we, you know, can do better things with our trash than burning it. It's really exciting to see leadership from so many Minnesotans, particularly in the Zero Waste Coalition, and from Conservation Minnesota, and from you know, just fellow Minnesotans who are looking for new solutions. So there's a lot of really exciting work that needs to be done. Like I said, we're dealing with maybe 40% of it with this bill, but that leaves the other 60% that is still accumulating and is still, you know, ending up in our bodies, which is a problem.
Yep. Well, we're getting close to time here. So if Dylan and Representative Jordan, if you guys were going to leave people with one word or one way to recommend what they can do to help on the Packaging Act, or one thought to take away from this event, Dylan, what would you tell someone who said they're interested in helping?
They can reach out to their representative, whether it's in the House or the Senate, and voice their support for these bills as they move through the legislature, and you know, help push back against the disinformation that is being put out there fighting these bills from those large industry organizations that Representative Jordan talked about. So because it is a very good bill, and it will again transform the recycling system for Minnesota for the better, for good.
Does that sound right, Representative Jordan?
Yes, that sounds right. Just to kind of put that in context, you know, we've been in St. Paul here for a few months, and even though it's only you know, 20 minutes from my home in Northeast Minneapolis, or you know, or 50 minutes by a bus and train, it feels like you're very far away, and you do end up spending a lot of time in committee listening to the listening to, industry lobbyists and everyone else. So it makes such a difference when you hear from your constituents, your friends and neighbors, that sent you here to fight for them, to make sure that they know that you're watching, that you care about this, and this has a real impact on your lives. Because it does. You're all here because you care about the environment, you care about public health, you care about, if you're here spending, your last few hours of a very beautiful day before we have an epic Midwest thunderstorm, you really care about this. And your legislators need to know that you care about this, because even though I feel really excited and good, and I'm really riding that energy very high right now, it's still going to be a fight. And I always use the word fight very deliberately, because we're not going to just be able to, have an easy time with this. We have a very different Senate, even though than our House. Our House has been very, very firm on this, but senators really need to hear from you. So please reach out to your senators. Please send your House reps just a note of like, you got this, you can do it. You're going to pass a good bill, feel good about it. That does really help to know that, like, yeah, people are watching and feel good about it. But then, people really do need to hear that you, as, one of their constituents, cares about this and cares about solid waste in general. It is critically important. And this week is going to be one of those pivotal weeks to stand firm and pass a really strong bill that puts people first.
Thank you, Representative Jordan, for your time tonight, and Dylan DeThomas, thank you for joining us from wherever you are. Thanks to my colleagues Tiffany and Avery at Conservation Minnesota. We hope everyone who's listened has learned about the Packaging Act, and will reach out to their senators and their House members and let them know that they support it. Did I miss anything, Tiffany?
I don't think so.
Right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and maybe we'll see you at the Capitol one day.
Just want to give one big close out here too, and thanking everybody again for being with us, and thank you to Representative Jordan and Dylan for sharing your expertise with us, and Nels, thank you for an engaging discussion. We are fortunate to have such good people working hard to ensure that we can address our garbage problem for future generations. Just a quick housekeeping note here. I want to just encourage everybody to continue to stay engaged with Conservation Minnesota and stay tuned for more events like this coming soon. And lastly, I mentioned before, I'm a board member of Conservation Minnesota, and we're currently looking for additional members to join our board. So if you're a leader in business, government, philanthropy, or another relevant area who wants to get further involved in protecting the great outdoors, I encourage you to apply. We just dropped the link in the chat, and you can go to our website to learn more about it. So with that, I will officially close it out. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you so much.